Hello and welcome to all the ghouls and vampires out there. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan,
Hello and greetings.
and we're continuing our little book club of Frankenstein. Let's hope at least one person takes a look at this video. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves. Anyways, in chapter 3, Frank turns 17 years old. Hooray! Hip hip hooray! And he goes off to study at Ingolstadt. I hope I said that right.
Yeah. And this is after his mother dies from scarlet fever.
Yeah, or I think tuberculosis, isn't it? So, Elizabeth she ended up falling sick, and Mommy basically cared for her till Mommy died, like you said. So, that was an interesting thing where it's almost, the image we're supposed to almost get is that the life was bled out of Mom into Elizabeth, in a way. At least on some sort of figurative level, which is rather disturbing. That said, I'm going to be honest. From what I've read, I'm really liking Henri de Clerval. I'm really liking Clerval. I hope he doesn't disappoint me later in the novel, as he just strikes me as the smartest character in the room and as the nicest guy. Basically, every man wants to be like him. Every woman wants to be with him. He's Gallivant, basically. I'm joking. Anyways, Victor doesn't want to be separated from his family, but then he goes off to school anyways, to university. Initially meets Professor Kremp, who's, just like quite a few of my own philosophy and literature professors, just overall having nothing but scorn for ancient literature and whatnot. Although I did have a few professors who were in love and obsessed with Victorian lit and ancient literature like the Iliad, the Odyssey, and whatnot, and Shakespeare. But it's Waldman. Like, it's interesting that in 1815, when this novel was essentially written, Mary Shelley is using two stereotypes for professors. Someone who's like, oh, it's all about the new learning, and then you've got Waldman, or Waldman, I think it's supposed to be, if it's German. You've got him basically like the traditional professor who's got gray hairs and is going, oh, the ancient ways are always best, the ancient learning.
And it's funny how the philosophy professor, Kremp, thinks, oh, the old philosophers, they're obsolete, forget about them. And then you have the chemistry teacher, professor, the one based in science, that says, we can't forget what came before us.
Yeah, I really like
We've got to remember those like Agrippa and
all the rest. Yeah. It's apparent which one of them is smarter and a better person. But the trouble is, Victor doesn't incorporate into himself immediately the goodness of Waldman. Now, I'm going to say this. There is a good side to Victor. You can see that in his bond with Elizabeth and Clerval. Like, I'm just saying, we've been hard on him in the past few chapters, but I think we do need to mention that there is a good side to him in the novel. That he is rather like Anakin in that he struggled to be a good person. He didn't really succeed for a while because, he became obsessed. In chapter 4, it's his accident that gets him thinking about mortality, and then he goes off on a quest to find the source of life itself, digging up cemeteries and committing experiments and torturing small animals. So that what little goodness that was there previously is kind of forgotten there. The thought of torturing small animals, I'm sorry, but I'm French, so we French have a predilection for loving animals, especially canines. And so it's just part of our culture. And so imagining someone torturing animals like that just horrifies us.
And it doesn't help that he alienates his family and friends to focus on the science, which
he forgets to write letters to them and whatnot.
we can actually say that his family and friends are symbolic of his goodness.
Yeah, he forgets about his own inner goodness in a way. Yeah, I did notice that. I like that you pointed that out. He kind of forgets all about morality, about friends and everything, just to focus on his crazed experiments. And he starts the experiments not with much success, and apparently he becomes increasingly thin because he's not eating and not sleeping. He's focusing entirely on his work.
He's becoming also more skittish and suspicious of everything.
Well, primarily he's becoming obsessed. And the chapter basically ends with his dad worrying over him from a distance. And his dad's basically driving himself almost ill with worry for Victor and is going, "What? He hasn't written. What's going on? Is everything okay over there?" He's having basically the kind of panic attack a parent feels when the child goes abroad. And the parent is suffering from empty nest syndrome to an extent. It's very evident that though Victor has younger brothers, Victor is the favorite. And that the father struggles at the separation. Elizabeth, for her part, is struggling because she's obviously in love with Victor. And Henri is obviously worried because I only got a little ahead of this chapter. He comes along to represent the family, basically coming on ahead of them because he finally managed to convince his dad to allow him to go to school. And he shows up and kind of is going, "What's going on with you, Victor?" So we do get that, like, Henri is the real smart one. He's the expert at linguistics. He's the poet. He's the master of history. He has an understanding of psychology far better than Victor, it seems. I suspect he's probably going to die. Because he's just too good to be true. I just hope that he doesn't... Although I also have the sneaking suspicion he's going to be the one to raise the monster. That I don't know because I haven't read that far ahead, but I have the suspicion that he takes in Adam and starts to teach him languages and literature. Although I'm probably wrong there.
It's been a while since I've read, and I am eager to figure out who teaches him all of that.
So in other words, you're not going to tell me squat until we reach that point.
Exactly.
Tease. I hate it. So yeah,
we all hate spoilers.
I love spoilers.
Which, if people hate spoilers, then why are they watching this video?
Yes. But honestly, my favorite character so far is Henri de Clerval. Clerval just seems to me like the nicest guy and like the only one with a brain between his ears who kind of sometimes sees Victor for what he is, but at the same time is generous and kind enough to be his friend. And he seems like the kind of friend who's... Now this might sound weird, but Victor seems like the typical son of new money who wastes his dad's money on needless things. While Clerval is basically the friend who's kind of like Peter Parker to Harry Osborn. You know, just there to keep him out of trouble. And chaperone and goes, "Listen, you know, like, I love you, man, but you're not doing right by yourself. You got to do better because, you know, he's the true friend." In a way, he's a bit like I said, Peter Parker with Harry Osborn or Flash Thompson with Harry Osborn. Because Peter and Flash in the comics of Spider-Man were always the ones looking out for Harry. And they were the ones who were really hurt by him when he always turned foul. Especially considering Peter was the one who was in love with Mary Jane and she was in love with Peter. And how everything he did seemed to have the goal of inflicting as much pain as possible upon MJ and Peter and Flash. Victor, though, is not as... in some ways not as terrible as Harry Osborn, as he's a special brand of evil. I'm just saying. Victor's not exactly good either. But it's clear that he's a thoughtless, feckless individual who played God when he really shouldn't have. He's utterly utterly foolish and wicked. He tortured small animals. This guy is evil. Like, and yeah, he's not a reliable narrator. He's good at trying to sell himself, but wow. Honestly, part of me wishes Clerval got married to Elizabeth. Screw Victor, because Clerval seems like a great guy. And all I know is that by the time he shows up, he's apparently abandoned his dreams of going off to become a glorious military man and instead has decided that he's going to go teach at a university in Eastern Europe about poetry and linguistics over there. So, yeah, he wants to go off abroad, but he wants to go earn his fortune before he comes back home. So he's basically like every other young man. Honestly, Elizabeth should have gone for him. He seems like he's... Honestly, it seems like Clerval is almost the eldest brother in the Frankenstein family, where he's the one who's like, don't worry, Dad, I'll go check up on my kid brother. And he then tells Elizabeth, his brother's girlfriend, don't worry, Elizabeth, I'll go check up on him. Goes off, continuing to write to them, then nurses his brother back to health. Like, who is this god amongst men? And, like, honestly... Victor probably should have emulated his bestie's behavior far more than going down the path he did go, like torturing small animals. I know I keep coming back to that, but... And dissecting corpses. What the heck is he thinking?
He's going mad.
Yeah. And Waldman doesn't... I'll criticize him. He should have seen the signs, and he doesn't. He's so blinded by his affection for his favorite student that he doesn't see that he's insane! Like, the funny thing is that in the modern version of the Frankenstein story, that is to say Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park novel, the first one, people point out far more easily how cruel and wicked and insane Hammond is. And they're just like, wow, man, you have no goodness in you. And in the movie, honestly, in some ways, he has the same personality as Victor. He's just like, well, condos. If I was to revive condos, not one of you would have something to complain about. No, you're missing the point here. Dinosaurs had their chance. Nature selected them for extermination. What are you doing bringing them back? What are you, insane? But Hammond is so in love with himself, he's like, well, I did this. No, like, that's the thing. Victor's has the same personality and problem, and this, I think he does kind of have, he's in some ways a bit like the movie version of Hammond and a bit like the book version in equal measures, except even more thoughtless. Because at least a movie version of Hammond at one point is just like, what have I done? And yeah, Victor kind of eventually gets that, but he's still an idiot. And a bit more monstrous in some ways. Because movie Hammond at least, well, gets a redemption arc. Victor, like, honestly, is there a redemption from what he's done? From what he's committed? Like, I'm just saying, he didn't just sin against God, so to speak, but he sinned against other men because he dissected their bodies. A little respect for the dead, man. That is horrible. Thoughtless. And he sinned against animals because he tortured them to death. Yes, nature can be very, very cruel because, like, we've had a dog who she'd catch mice and toss them in the air and torture them that way. But that's part of nature. But the thing is, to actively torture an animal simply to see, just cause, this is not like our dog that was basically her wanting to eat them. That was her meal. Bears do similar stuff. Snakes do similar stuff. But this is not a predator on the hunt. This is just a man kind of clinically studying his victims to see how they respond and where the life comes from and whatnot. Honestly, wow. And I'm amazed no character seems to see him for what he is. The only one who seems to is Clerval, but he seems a little blinded by affection and love for Victor and gratitude for what Victor has done for him financially. So I just hope Clerval doesn't suffer too much in the story, because honestly, he seems like one of them that deserves a happy ending, at least. But I don't think he's going to get it, because this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is not Dracula, which is a Gone with the Wind adventure romance story more than it is horror.
Yes.
This is actual horror. Like, sorry, those passages about dissecting people and torturing animals. Wow, that's horrifying. And the way Victor tries to go, like, oh yeah, it's normal stuff. What? Dude, what are you doing? Yeah, sorry. I've gone on for too long. Anyways, I think that's all we've got to say about this.
Indeed.
So, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button to stay tuned for our next couple of videos. Our next horror video will be a horror cinema podcast video again. And then we're going to continue with Frankenstein in a few days with a few more chapters, as chapters 5, 6, and the next couple of ones seem like they've got plenty to be discussed over. And if you want to check out our other channels, do feel free to check them out and subscribe to them as well. So take care until then, and happy Thanksgiving.